Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the next edition of Catalyst Story Road. My name is Philip Gilpin Jr. I am the CEO here at the Catalyst Story Institute. Thanks for joining today. I am on the road, and I'm going to be working behind the scenes to manage some of the questions that you have. So if you're watching live on YouTube and Facebook, put your comments, put your questions in the comment section, and we will try to get to them later on in the hour. But at this time, I'd like to turn it over to our host, Miss Nikki Coble. Nikki, it's all yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Philip. And welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here with us for our indie panel on maximizing low budget production. And we have with us today the founder and CEO of Daymaker Productions, Sofia Monroe, as well as our award-winning writer, director, and friend of Catalyst, both of you are, Dinh. Thanks for being here, guys.
Thanks for having us.
We're delighted to share this with you. Of course, you're welcome. And so we're throwing around the word low budget production today, and that means different things to different people. And what we're talking about is anything up to the sort of $100,000 threshold for ourselves today. But what we will look at over the course of the day or the course of our time together is how that means different things from union to union. If you're using non-union talent, you may have some of the same positions of people that you're looking for, like a line producer, assistant director, people like that. But there are definitely discrepancies from union to union in terms of the WGA has a threshold, say, of under 1.2 million and below is there kind of like, well, this is where we start to negotiate. That's different for IATSE. IATSE has everything below 6 million, I think. So that's a gray area to begin with. And if Phil wouldn't mind just bringing up, just so we have our context, the DGA agreements at the moment, the Directors Guild, give us a moment to pull that up. The Directors Guild budget levels, you'll see at the top, we're kind of going from way up at 11 million. This is our low budget range in their consideration. You can see the budget range, the daily and weekly rate for a director, as well as the director's cut time that they need to be allowed and their preparation time. But where we're looking is all the way down in that gray area of 0 to 500,000 as the overall budget. That means that the daily and weekly rate for the DGA is negotiable. It means that it can be no less than 20 days is what the director has to be allowed to cut, but it should equal and must equal principal photography, that window of time. You'll also see at the bottom there, it's a 13-week minimum for level 3 and up, but there's quite a lot of information there, as well as considerations like travel, what the second unit director's payment needs to be, what a sequel payment would need to be if you think the thing would be serialized. Also 18.5% for pension and health. So lots of things to consider there, as well as agent fees. I'm sure that our guests can weigh in on that as well if that's something that comes up. But that's a lot of ocean to swim in, below 500,000. I thought there would definitely be other levels in that threshold. Do you want to pull up the narrative budget for, this is all theatrical agreements. This is the narrative budget for, this is SAG. This is SAG-AFTRA. So the SAG-AFTRA for the Actors Union, you'll see that our basic theatrical agreement up at the top is 2.5 million. That's the top threshold they're talking about for low budget. And then they'll move down to what we're talking about today in that gray area, the ultra low budget, 250,000 or less. A short project, 50,000 or less. And then it starts to involve limiting the amount of time that the piece can be, and then student film beyond that. Those considerations also include 10% agent commission, as well as pension and health. So we just wanted to pull those up for you, and we can circle back to them later in more detail, but we want to dive right in with our guests. Welcome, welcome again. So what do you think, as far as a film's success, a theatrical production's success, does the success of it lie in the building of a budget or the managing of that budget?
I think it's both. I think it's more than just the budget and the management of things. Obviously, the two charts that you put, when I look at them, I'm like, I'm super confused. And it takes a lot of effort to understand everything, and partnerships and relationships sort of help fill in the gaps. I've done my own budgets and my own bids for some commercial projects in the past, and doing it once or twice, really just the first few times doing the budgets, it was confusing, but then after a while, I just got used to it and understood the numbers. And so really, I guess the concept is to start wrapping our heads around these numbers and these rules and regulations so that we can abide by them. But most of the time, low indie stuff means you're really scrappy and you're sort of avoiding the unions as well.
Yeah.
And that's also something to consider. I'm not sure if people want to hear that they want to avoid the unions, but when you're super low budget, you sort of have to be scrappy.
Absolutely. That kind of a production can often involve, at the early stages of things, which some of us have done or want to do, are bartering, right? You're saying, I'll hold a boom on your set if you'll be my script supervisor, and things like that, trading energy back and forth, sharing equipment and things like that. Sophia, what about you? What do you think?
I agree. It's both. It starts off with the building of it, because I think it takes being able to have an eagle-eyed view of what it is you're going to deal with, what you're about to walk into. I think that's where experience comes into play. You're able to see the problems before others can. You're able to anticipate and help people avoid, versus stepping into a situation where you have to repair. So I think building the budget, really talking it out, pre-production and development is huge, key. Put so much more time into developing and figuring out what your budget looks like. And then next step is management. Have somebody in place who could really honor that budget and the conversations you've had with your team about why that budget and those numbers are so important. So it's definitely both.
I'm going to throw another question out there. This is about who you need around you. Can you speak to the difference between what a line producer would do versus a unit production manager? These are the people that are helping us shape our budget and even know what should be in a budget if we haven't done this before.
My experience with those two roles, I think once you step into doing micro budget anything, sometimes those roles really are one. I know there's a point where I'm like, oh, line producer is UPM. Like there was a point where that was. I think it's important that you do have those two roles, because line producer to me is you sit, you see the budget, you understand what you're about to work with, what's necessary. You help find the people to put in place and based on your experience. And then the UPM, that's somebody who's your co-pilot, right-hand person who is a line producer in training or a producer in training. And they not only have the crew, the recommendations, but they have a bit of the instinct. I feel to have eyes on where those dollars are going or where they could go. But I feel like, what do you feel?
Yeah, I agree. It's a little mix of both responsibilities for both title roles. But it all boils down to the person and their personality and how they handle stuff. That's sort of the foundation for success when we're dealing with such small budgets.
Absolutely. And as far as crew's concerned, if we're saying we have a little money could be, say, in the $30,000 to $50,000 range. It depends on if, of course, these are all case by case. Somebody might be looking at an episodic series versus a short that they're trying to make. So everybody's going to prioritize in a different way. But there are absolutely people we must have with us, right? Who do we think those crew members are? Who must we have? Who can we not spare?
Sophia?
I believe that it really also, it depends on what the project is. I think it's depending on the genre, how many days of filming, if you're going to work with kids, special interest groups, stunts, VFX. I think there's so many different baptized by fire, learn the hard way situations where, I feel like there's a core group of people, but it depends on your team. Like, cause I know that I was very lucky to start my micro budget indie producing career with a core group of even just 3 other individuals through the course of our 6 features, where the 3 of us were able to do a 9, 10, 12 person job and efficiently, and without it being a liability to our EPs. But that takes practice, that takes a lot. And I think at some point you should absolutely graduate from that. So I'll think on that a little bit more. I think it just depends on the budget, but there's a core group of people. I'll chime in.
So Sophia's advice, just for everybody, we can break that down, is get unicorns. Just write down, get creative unicorns who can wear all the hats with you, because it really is about that teamwork.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree 100%. You have to be able to do multiple jobs and do them well, and understand where our faults are, and hope that we can, have conversations about that so that our partners will pick up the slack a little bit. I'll add some materialistic items. I try to favor food, catering, meals, crafty, super important. There's just something special about feeding people and how they react. A psychological appreciation for someone else's livelihood, give them food. Obviously, we have new COVID protocols that we have to abide by, and so you really can't avoid that right now.
Right.
My OCD-ness, I always put extra money in for hard drives, because having 1 copy or 2 copies just isn't enough anymore. So that's really important, and that sort of trickles into media management on the day, not necessarily DIT, not someone actually coloring or editing, but someone just downloading, copying, duplicating the footage, and double checking audio and that stuff. I think sound recording is one of the most neglected aspects of production, and you need a really good sound recorder that can record multiple tracks from multiple perspectives on the set, so that you can take those split audio in the edit and really dictate the storytelling. I've been in situations where 2 tracks were mixed into one, and you're stuck, and it's like it's so awful. It is just so awful.
And somebody's usually in whisper range while someone else is fully on their voice.
Lapping. And so
doesn't help.
That audio, when we get into a situation where the audio is hard to work with, it really affects how you can edit something. And it's not something tangible. You just, when it happens, you're like, oh, okay, well, we're stuck here. Music and sound design and mixing music, anything audio related is really powerful, and so I always try to force the issue with music and sound design and audio mixing. Art direction seems to always get neglected as well.
Yeah.
Not enough people, not enough money, not enough time to pick up and drop off. And so that's something I like to focus on. And a big surprise to me when one of my pieces went to HBO, was distributed by HBO, was E&O insurance, which is like errors and omissions insurance. And that was just a backup to clear any artwork or design work in your background. Like, for instance, if we're talking about my shot right now, E&O insurance doesn't come in because it's all white, unless someone owns the white wall.
Right.
And for you, Nikki, if I could read a book,
Van Gogh is going to be pissed.
there it is. Yeah, that's the picture. Someone that has licensing to that, if they see it, they're going to cause an issue, and E&O insurance is going to help with that. But in the back end, when a distributor is asking for paperwork, they usually say, we need clearance from all the artists. And luckily, the landlord of the house owned all the art inside of her house. And so she was able to sign the contract as well as go to all the original artists to ask them to sign the contract. And it's in perpetuity. It's, you want to say that it's in perpetuity, and forever, that this film can be streamed and played infinitely forever without having to recontact the artist for permission to show that piece of art in the background. And you never see it on the day until you're in the edit, and you're like, oh shit, that's
we didn't clear that.
That's artwork right there. Yeah.
And that can
So
even
those are hard costs.
that could even be true for shooting in front of a mural or graffiti outside. You know, you have permission for the location, but do you have permission for that art?
Yeah.
That's very different. Just to kind of circle back to make sure we're not leaving a hole here, I'll speak from my experience. I had about a roughly $30,000 budget, leaving a lot of things out. Our actors were deferring pay. We had a new media agreement. This was for a 20 episode series that I was taking on the festival circuit called Awkwardly. And there was a lot of bartering involved. But some of the things that surprised me using union, because I myself am union and I wanted to use my friends, and in order to have that contract, we needed to have insurance and workers' comp. You need to have general liability insurance. These are all things, there's multiple different ways to do it. There's underwriters that can kind of help you do these things, but figuring out how to do the workers' comp and making sure that if you're shooting in a cafe and a neighborhood cafe is letting you shoot there for $400 for a 4-hour window, if you break anything, you have to have insurance. You also have to have the insurance that covers the equipment that you're bringing on there. If you're renting the equipment, or if my DP happened to have his own LLC, so his equipment for his side of things was covered under that insurance. But that was like before anybody has arrived on set. For us, it was $1,000, I think, for 12 days of shooting, that you just kind of set fire to it on the lawn. Not really. You hope it's for nothing, but like you just kind of go, there's $1,000 out of the budget right away. And yeah. In terms of personnel, the reason I bring this up is because I had my DP. I was the writer, but I had directors for each of the episodes so that I could kind of be a showrunner and sit back and run the logistics, do the orders, things like that, make sure everything was running. But what we didn't have after day one was an AD. And just dive into for a moment, if you would, why you must have an AD running the clock for you, making sure that we really do need to move on for this shot. Can you guys speak to the value of having an AD with you, which I didn't, and we should have?
I mean, having an AD, that is one of the most important roles to fill, because to have that person to step outside of what your head is, the director's head, the producer's head, because the producers are the firefighters. The producers are the ones trying to make sure nothing gets to Video Village, to the talent, to the crew, to compromise the project. The AD really holds people to the schedule. They make sure people are in check, because all of us are in time warps, I think, when we're in creator land. Like the hour goes by in 10 minutes, and if you don't have that AD continually having you check in to make sure you're just honoring what it is everyone talked about, what the day should be, I think that's so important. AD I think is one of the most important. And then as you scale your projects, or the more people or the more moving parts that you have to keep eyes on or keep on track, I highly suggest having a second AD, because then you'll very quickly find yourself in a position where your first AD was supposed to be exactly why you hired them, to take care of this list of priorities, but then they're being pulled in as a PA, they're being pulled doing second AD asks, which is a whole different realm, takes a whole different need. So I think as you scale, you just really figure out what are your most important roles, and then you ask them, find their weaknesses, find their strengths, and have an honest conversation about where do you need support, because your strongest and most important roles are going to quickly succumb to some of the circumstances that you're dealing with a low budget if they don't have support also. So I think it's incredibly important.
Dinh, would you like to weigh in?
Sure, I can add some personal experience to working with ADs. I try to replicate my experience on set during takes as if I'm sitting on my couch watching television and making judgments. So there's a state of mind that I like to be in. And in addition to everything that Sofia mentioned and the importance of it, if I'm calling action and cut, I'm not sitting on my couch watching the show. And so I try to really lean on anyone that can help alleviate some of that stress when I'm on set. And so the AD will be the one to call action or cut and really relay information to the leapfrogging of the production, right? We're setting up a shot, something else is going to get set up that needs to be ready in about an hour, and the ADs are the people that are in charge of that. And then, background and background wardrobe and just a lot of things, technical engineering type of things that are happening that would take a director away from being in the moment with the actors and being in the moment with the camera operators, because it's a dance, right? Like when we're making stuff, it's a dance. And if one is thinking about, what the second setup is for the day, then one is not in the moment with what the magic that's happening in front of them. So the 80s, really important. That's why I like 80s. As long as they don't yell, I'm cool.
Yeah, right. Something suffers if you're not careful. Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's where we got tripped up, for sure.
Something that came to mind also, if you are a first time anything embarking on the journey of something narrative, theatrical, even just something multiple days, get yourself a script supervisor. I think a script supervisor and a DIT, what was mentioned, because doing, again, preventative, I think that's so important to remember. When you're doing small budget, always think forethought, what's preventative? How can I avoid this situation? Even with the insurance thing, that's one of the most important things, because then you have the peace of mind. You can handle $1,000 to $1,500 to $2,000 deductible. Always remember that's going to feel a lot better writing that check and having to dip into contingency for that versus going, oh my God, I didn't spend X amount on insurance and now I have to pay for $5,000 worth of damage. Back to the script supervisor. The script supervisor will help save you time in post. I think so many people forget that you're not over a lot of your problems once you do your martini shot. Once you go into post, you're really left with the reality of how well you prepared or didn't. And especially if you're dealing with so few funds in post-production that you do have an editor who's taking on X, Y, and Z, or you have hopes for a great distribution plan, make them feel good about it. Ask your editor, what do they need to help best do their job in post? And that'll help you plan for pre-production and principal too, for sure.
That's so important, because I think a lot of times, especially if people are fundraising on their own, say they're doing an Indiegogo or a Kickstarter, they're kind of thinking, what's the bare bones amount we could do this for, right? For us, it was $15,000, and that was just with beg, borrowing, and stealing everything. And it kind of grew, eventually was more like 30, omitting all the things that we bartered for and what people did for free. But people sometimes come to the end of a project and go, oh, we don't have enough for post. You had to know what you had for post in the beginning, right? Because that color correction, that sound mix, those things are all going to make it pop. Otherwise, if we were shooting this, the green of the light behind me would kind of make everyone go, oh, what an interesting idea for that movie. I mean, you have to give it that final polish, or you shouldn't start the project. You have to include that in your budget. And the other thing I think that is super helpful, and I don't know how your experience of this is, but having hands on set. So if you're doing a scrappy production, the PAs, we hope they're being paid, but if they can't, you must feed them, as Dinh said. You must pay for parking. You must pay for transport. Nobody should ever be paying to get to your set if they're not being paid, if they can't help that. Because like Sofia was talking about, you don't want to be the showrunner trying to jot down or go run and get coffee for people who are flagging in the corner. You want hands on set to do that. And the trade-off is that if you have those hands and they don't have a commitment or they don't feel appreciated, they will disappear over the course of filming, and you'll need more. So appreciate the people who are volunteering to help you, feed them, as Dinh said, and it unfortunately cannot always be pizza. Especially right now, I don't think it can be pizza, can it?
If you love other people, if you genuinely care, like food is so important. At least love people and show them that they matter by food, and that they're, no pizza ideally, unless you agree to that beforehand and everyone knows what they're signing up for and know that this is just so it's for the team.
Yes, because you can.
And the COVID protocols get in the way of sharing.
They do.
As well.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
good thing. Like that is the one sort of silver lining right now of all this terrible awfulness, is that everybody doesn't go, oh, it's lunch and you gave us pizza.
Yeah.
I actually, because I don't want to talk as though like I've never done that. If anything, I'm speaking from a place of I've accidentally done that. Like, if that's one of the things too, you have to check yourself as a producer, as a multi-hatter. If it's your project and you're responsible for people, it's your responsibility to make sure that you're not in a position where you're spread too thin, where, oh gosh, it's almost second meal, but now what's available? Who can I call to make sure it's not pizza? Like, there are some things that seem so 101 obvious, like you plan these things the night before or on the day. But I've been in the situation where I've accidentally let my crew down, and thank God we've worked together so often, or my apology was accepted and I've been able to make it up later. But just, you don't want to be in that position where you have to say, I'm sorry. Because even if people might say they're okay with it, you just, don't spread yourself so thin that you can't prepare the best you can to not let people down. Even just that last hour of production, definitely.
Well, and I would say, even though my very first project was 2012, I am still learning and practicing the fact that being a good producer, as we're talking about, and the reason why people are watching, is to make sure they're covering these bases. But my idea at the beginning of being a good producer was that nothing would go wrong. And I'm here to just allay that for anybody who's watching, to say it will go wrong. And being a good producer is about knowing how to handle yourself when it does. And that's part of what we're talking about today, is making sure that we have these things in our minds going forward. What are some other common omissions, things that people don't think about when they're making a budget? Like, you're going to have to pay for batteries for the sound guy, or transportation to get the crew back if they're leaving overnight, that they're not having to lug things back on their own. Are there any other omissions you can think of, things that people don't include in a budget and should leave room for?
I feel like we talked about a lot of it already. I can't think of any other things. Sophia, do you have anything?
It goes a bit in line, I think, with the insurance, but I mean, actually, no, we didn't touch on this directly. You talked a little bit about errors, omissions, and contracts, but if you're going into a small budget, make room and find resources to get yourself a good legal team. Because I know I started my career, we really lucked out of just having a little bit of legal support. But I think a lot of people have been there where you Google your way through some clauses. You put your...
Yeah, you're right.
Right. Okay, good. Thank you for at the beginning of my career, and you go through, okay, what can we put together that's just enough to make sure this and that? But I really, from experience, don't put yourself in that position either. I was so lucky that I found a blessing of a person and a teammate at the beginning of my career who was an attorney. And he was like an angel investor of sorts when it came to those efforts, because he believed in my company, he believed in what the big vision was, and then found a way for it to be, okay, how is it mutually beneficial? If you don't have the resources, what can you offer professionally to somebody who is willing to come to the table and says, hey, I'm willing to contribute this or invest this. It might not be monetary, it might be this. Let's find a way to work it out and leverage what you have and make that work. But contracts, because everyone has been to the point where you pour yourself into a project and sometimes you lose sight of a few things, and then you're left with this project that you're so excited about, you believe in, it was worth it, but then someone comes to you and go, oh wait, actually this could be a legal issue. And then now you're scrambling to try to repair it, or as he said, find somebody to contact, and they might feel a different way. They might now see dollar signs. They might now see, oh, I didn't know this is what I agreed to, and now this could be a topic of discussion. What else can I get from this? And so contracts, absolutely contracts, and a legal person who could be your teammate.
So smart, because I think in our scrappy nature of wanting to just create something, say that it's a web series or a short, we have just the desire of getting it out there, getting it seen, taking it to festivals, which is something, footnote, you also want to budget for if you can at that time, or do another round of fundraising then. But we think of those things in the moment and we go, oh, well, we're shooting at my cousin's place and it's fine. It's my cousin. Put everything on paper.
Yes.
If you're using their property, if you're using them to break a leg, it's different. It will cover your bases.
Yes, and if you can't afford to get an attorney, or maybe you don't feel you have something to leverage, and in my case, my attorney was an incredibly capable executive producer and producer in the making. Like, he became a wonderful teammate. He was interested in production, so it was a wonderful union of sorts. But if you don't have the ability to get really an attorney, you have to do what you can. You don't, and I kind of lost it a little bit. You have to really, that's where it is. In this day and age, now that we're on Zoom, if you cannot find an attorney or somebody to lock in your contracts, record every single meeting. Already have an understanding with the person that you're about to embark on this journey with, and like, hey, listen, nothing personal. We are talking about a low budget. We're both stepping outside of our comfort zones to either myself in my position contribute and give more than what I'm charging, because you'll start to graduate to where you still commit to things where you want to help and it's low budget, but it's far below your rate, and now you're possibly compromising X, Y, and Z. Record every meeting. And somebody shouldn't feel bad about that, because then it'll also keep people, hold them accountable, and maybe they will think before they speak or before what they promise or what they're assigning to. And that's something too, I'm speaking from experience. I regret not recording some Zooms while, especially in development, I feel could be something. But it's a conversation to have, and it's something that I think is very worthwhile.
Could either of you speak to, along the line of insurance, why you would want to start from the place of creating an LLC, if you can, to separate your personal self and your personal liability from the business?
My experience with the feature films, it made a lot of sense. We created an LLC for each feature film, just to separate our corporation along with all of us who were involved. Especially if there's so many liabilities, I think for a small budget, that would probably make a lot of sense. And it just helps streamline some things. Once you have an LLC, you can set up the bank account, you can get the authorized reps to make the different decisions. And then, have your blanket annual insurance policy to that LLC. I think that's a secret not a lot of people stress, is that so many people go into a project and go, oh, let me get short-term production insurance. And then that's 4 or 5 times the amount of what you would pay for if you just did an annual insurance policy. So even if you don't want to do an LLC per project, have one LLC for your batch of maybe short projects you're about to embark on. Get a blanket annual production insurance policy. Some people think that's $5,000, $6,000 off the bat, but no, you get a good agent, you talk to an underwriter. Some people would be surprised. You can go ahead and put $300 to $500 to $1,000 down on a $6,000, $7,000 policy, make monthly payments. And that's something that's such a big, a really valuable asset. So I think that's important.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was very informative, Sofia. That's a really good hack. I'd like to add that if you have filmmaker friends who are also ready to make something, you partner up with them and split the cost. And now you're creating a company and you have your partnerships in the company, and so that insurance cost gets divided up however many partners you have. So, and then everyone's allowed to use the insurance policy for the productions that they're about to embark on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's what we did.
Oh, go ahead. No, go ahead.
That's what we did in college, because there was I think 4 or 5 of students that were in their senior year ready to shoot stuff. And so we all formed an LLC and split the costs of the insurance. And then for the whole year, we all made our films or whatever we were making.
Teamwork makes the dream work, right?
Yes, but paperwork matters too. That insurance means if you don't have paperwork for when that claim happens, and then maybe that's another thing too, if you're going to follow our advice, do your due diligence on what the claim process is, because I've been there before where I've had to deal with an L&D, and if I didn't have one wording or one clause or one piece of paper that legitimized that relationship with that renter or that location, or didn't kind of check that box, that claim would have been nothing, and I would have owed $4,000 for the G&E gear that malfunctioned on a ship versus just being able to pay the $1,500. So I think, yeah, paperwork again goes back to that, but the insurance thing's a pretty cool teamwork.
Yeah, I would tack on to that if, often it might be more, depending on which coast people are on. New York City has some sort of archaic things where you have to, within 6 months or something, post your LLC and advertise in a newspaper, which can be very expensive, things like that. So sometimes if you have a residence that is a legitimate residence or that you're connected to, I was able to do mine out of a different state because I have a legitimate residence there. It was less expensive than New York was. I'm not sure what it would be for LA, but it's different from state to state. And just to underline, the difference between that is somebody could, if they do break their leg on your set, even if it's your best friend, they're upset and they have hospital bills. And the point is that if something like that happens, God forbid, and the insurance, the insurance covers what it needs to cover, but if anything else, no one's coming after you personally or your home to cover what they.
Correct.
You are separate then from the business, and that's so important.
Yeah.
I think we can leap forward to the money that we're talking about, where it can come from. In terms of crowdfunding, we know we have opportunities like Indiegogo and Kickstarter, things like that, Seed and Spark. There are grants and different entities that are willing to help and pitch in, depending on whatever criteria they have for contributing money and at what stage of your project you're on. But are there interesting grants, places, resources where people can look for grants or seek nonprofit to support and help them get those funds? Where would you point our audience to look for those resources?
There's a what do I call them? There's like a foundation called Visual Communications that supports the emerging storyteller community. And so when there are many entities that do this, where they have diversity clubs or fellowships where they sort of shepherd people and their projects forward. And so it's really just about using the power of the internet, figuring out what your identity is, associating yourselves with those entities and those foundations, and making friends. And sometimes you'll get lucky and you'll get put into a directing fellowship that may have money to give you for your project. Sundance Labs do that as well. And even Warner Brothers directing writing workshop, they make stuff. So it's looking for more of a corporate network, physical, like television network, that could possibly help you with what you want to do, because it doesn't always have to come out of your own pocket.
Right. And the more that it doesn't, the better off you are if you can help. I've also heard great feedback of reaching out to people who have, if you again harness the power of the internet, and you're searching for people who have supported similar projects before. So maybe somebody is really into horror and you've seen them share something that is of horror, then you can then reach out to those people who specifically already go out of their way to support said genre. Or if it's a women's director program, that that it's specifically focused on the fact that you will have a female director, and that is something that you are priding yourself on, to share that as part of your packaging.
Yeah.
Do you think a first-time creator should fit the vision to the budget, or the budget to the vision?
I suppose it depends on how much does that vision mean to you? What's the objective? I feel, from my experience, my first batch of productions I produced were the 6 micro-budget indie feature films. And those weren't passion projects, other than we were passionate about learning to be filmmakers. And we were super excited and felt so blessed that we had the opportunity, being so young, to be able to lead that and make it happen. And in that case, we actually fit the vision more than not to the budget. Because we had a little bit of insight into the distribution market and what our potential distributors maybe would appreciate. So we had so many conversations during development of like, okay, what do we have to start off with? And I'll use our I don't know which film to use as an example, but the conversations would be, okay, this is our minimum budget that we have, or actually our most budget. One of them was $15,000, which was one of our films, Dude, Where's My Dog? And it was a family kids film with a dog. And because the budget was so low, we had to determine, okay, well, what will make this valuable? And also, how can we still make it not look like $15,000? So that budget determined our vision, or our talent that we received, our scheduling. We ended up knowing, okay, $15,000, we have to do a 90-page script or an 82-page script in 7 days. Like, we literally produced a whole feature film in 7 days off $15,000. I don't know how we pulled it off on some things. So it's a whole nother conversation. But we had to tailor it to that because there's some compromise. As I moved forward and did more projects for my company, I think you just have to establish, again, what's your project for? What's it about? Play chess. Is it strategy? Is it portfolio? Relationship building? You have to figure it out and then find a way to make it work. So it really just depends on the budget, I feel. You just have to make some compromises.
And what the platform might be ultimately, if you're going to share it on a free streaming service, a YouTube, or are you trying to use it as proof of concept to pitch it to Amazon?
Yeah.
Dinh, what would you say if people can shoot on iPhones and find a platform now? You can create entire things in portfolio mode and have them really be quite stunning and have it be HD. What sets one project apart from the rest? It can be low budget, but what are the things that would make it look as though it weren't?
In regards to shooting on consumer products, consumer formats, I think that we've seen the success stories of those, and we take it and exaggerate it into our own successes. If I were to shoot on an iPhone and try to use that as my portfolio, as a calling card, I hope that the content that we shot was really amazing and that people would forget that it's on the iPhone format. And when they realize that it's on the iPhone format, they'll make it a big issue and then praise it, right? But that's a rare occurrence. And and it's tough to foresee that future and that sort of trajectory for your own projects. I strongly believe in, and I speak this from my own experience, I strongly believe in choosing the right lenses and the right time of day and the right camera to capture a really poetic image that tells a story beyond the page, so that in this accumulative effect of your short or your film, when someone watches it, they're not going to care what format it was on. They're just going to be taken away by the imagery. And so I'm not saying either one is the right answer, but my success has been more of shooting on professional cinema formats as opposed to when I would do my own docu stuff and borrow someone's camera and not care about the lens or the camera and just shoot stuff. And so it's really, I think what I distill it down to is, who are you as a storyteller? What are you doing with the camera to tell that story? And is it really interesting, and does it work? So, what would you do with an iPhone? Drop it from 50 feet. Yeah, because you can do that, right? So that's sort of the thinking. If I were to shoot with an iPhone, it's not because it's cheap, it's because it's small and I could move it. I could, the camera could move 60 miles an hour with me hanging out a car door. Can you do that with a cinema camera? Yeah, but it would take you 3 or 4 hours to set that up. And then so embracing the theme of the format and what it allows you to do, I think, is important. But there is no right answer to that, because it's art.
Exactly. And also what Sofia was saying is, what is the story you're trying to tell? Not how cheaply can I get away with it? It's, what do I need to tell this story well? And then I have to go about getting it. I have to invest in the idea to its fullest potential. And maybe that involves waiting for investors to come on board. But if it's really something you're passionate about, try to give yourself the best version of that thing and manifest it. How can a production design and scheduling be maximized for the production's benefit, do you think? You said you You shot some crazy amount of pages in a very small number of days.
Yeah.
How can you set yourself up for success with that?
I'll go back to it's about the development and the pre-production. I was really fortunate that the team and I, when we worked with Dream Factory and we did the 6 features, we tapped into LA Film School. I've been a big advocate for finding up-and-comers and students and finding, okay, let's sit down and talk, and what opportunities are you looking for? What are you excited to be a part of? And so I can say, I think a lot of our projects that were produced through that were by student designers. I think you find the people who are the most experienced and you need to put them in certain places. And then there's other areas of the production that you are able to have a little wiggle room of saying, okay, this project is, or this position I can delegate to somebody who's a little more up and coming, because there's not as much risk, or they'll be around an environment or be supervised to where you can still have eyes on the quality of the final product. But in my case, we tapped into really awesome up and coming students. And then on the other projects, it's just a matter of, again, pre-production, and you figure out what do you need and how much time does that person need to set up the shot, what resources, what support. So it's just project based.
Mm-hmm. You have to add buffers for that timing, right? That everything's like, well, they could totally cut it in 3 days. They could, but they should cut it in this amount of time and leave time for things to go wrong. Oh, we don't have that media. Oh, we need to copy this over. Always time.
Yeah, and if you do decide to go with somebody who's up and coming and establishing your career, then you have to allow more time. And I think that just goes across the board through your whole production. If you're dealing with somebody who doesn't have as much experience, your contingency doesn't just have to be monetary. Like, you absolutely have to sit down and figure out, okay, more prep days, more planning days, more conversations to talk it out. I think it's important.
Mm-hmm. Would you say that's kind of both financially and in terms of time? Should you build in, say, 15% for whatever might get in our way, right? Should you pad the do you think?
Depends on who you're working with and a whole bunch of other things, but I now know just there's never enough contingency if you're dealing with a micro budget, and if you're adding individuals who have varying degrees of experience. Like, I think the least experience of a team you have, the more contingency you need, and the more pre-production and development time you need, and just hours on the clock talking about what your plan is.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that you have to take that into consideration.
Mm-hmm.
Agree.
Well,
Nikki, when you say production design, do you mean what do you exactly mean by?
Well, what in
design?
my head was, say I've got, as a creator, I've got this wonderful thing that happens in 5 rooms of a house, but do I need to readjust and think that 5 rooms in a house is this many setups of this many angles? How can I kind of edit that down to give myself the time to really shoot what I need to shoot? Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure. There was a recent documentary called The Donut King, and they had a QA, and the director and producer spoke about how they shot their documentary. Obviously, it takes place over probably a year's worth of time, and they were super micro budget, low budget. And one of the stories they shared was the camera vendor would call them a couple days before a weekend and say, hey, the camera's available this weekend. And they would drop everything, pick up the camera, and then go shoot for the weekend and then return the camera. So it's the flexibility of that sort of, scheduling that one may need. If you're going to shoot in 5 different rooms in 5 different locations, then maybe that's 5 different weekends.
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to one thing that I've realized and knock myself for is that, we study how Hollywood does things, and then we enforce the Hollywood method on these indie projects. You're like, well, what are you talking about? That doesn't make any sense. So sort of making adjustments to what we're used to, what we see and what we learn, and applying it into this like reimagined way. If you have to shoot 6 weekends in a row, or 6 weekends in 6 months, that's what you got to do. And if that makes it tougher for you because you have to pick up and drop off stuff, well then, that's part of the struggle.
Yeah. And what just occurred to me is also that's something to be thinking about as a creator or as a producer, that the smaller the cast, not to limit, who can be involved, but the smaller the cast, the more likely is if you're making a commitment, someone's committing to 6 weekends of that. But if you have 30 people who are over 6 weekends, you're going to start to lose some of them. So really do try to add the points. Make sure everything is essential to what you're shooting. I do want to make sure that we leave time for some questions from our audience. But we only have 5 minutes left. So I'm curious if there are any. Philip will let me know if there are. But I didn't realize we had a hard out on the platform. So now we know contingency is happening. If something pops up, I will certainly ask it if there's any.
I'd like to just be a little philosophical, if I may, about this. I think we found when we're successful for something, we're sort of get lost in how that came about. What I'd like to attribute success to is the relationships that we've built over the course of a year or a decade to really let those moments happen. And so an example of that is when I wrote and directed my short film, the only thing that was missing was the script. So it's usually the other way around. You have a script and you're like, who's going to write, who's going to direct it, who's going to shoot it, who's going to produce it. And so if one can put time into building those relationships, you'll know that in 5 or 6 years, or maybe it's just a couple months, that the only thing missing is the script. And if you feel like you're close to that point, then that means you've been a successful human being for the past, whatever span of time that was. And that truly is a really good piece of duct tape that one could aspire to attain.
I would say, what are the small budget experiences each of you? I know we are limited on time, but are each of you particularly proud of a small budget experience where you kind of made magic from the clay?
I can say I've been counting my blessings so often that I think any small budget project that I've done, I'm really proud that it's either seen the light of day or just the relationships that have been built from them. Like to Dinh's point, I think what matters most is not what you have, it's who you have. And it's about the team and the relationships that you have after that project's said and done. Because I think as you become more experienced or you take on more things, like those projects are going to be okay, done, and then they're going to lose its fire. But the people you built that with, oh my gosh, that means more than anything. You'll find out too. Absolutely. But I'm just proud of the beginning of the career and what we're able to establish. I'd say the small micro budget features, because that was the biggest lesson. As I mentioned, it's not what you have, it's who you have. And during that time when I was producing, so many people would go, wait, you can't produce a film for $5,000, or you can't produce a film for $15,000, or you can't produce a feature film for, and I was so thankful that I was in the middle of doing it or had done it. And it was such a lesson of like, oh man, like so many people that you bring your idea to or your goal or what you're so fired up about and excited to do, so many people are going to respond from a place of they can't, or they don't see the vision, or they can't see, what is it, the forest through the trees, right? Is that what I mean? So they just don't know how to put it together themselves, and they can't see who you have on your team to make it happen. So I'd say that's probably one of the proudest and biggest takeaways, is that we were able to do something despite what people said was impossible and what we couldn't do. And I was just so thankful I found people who believed in me and I could count on too, to really make things happen, to build our careers.
You make two great points, one of which is that adage, which I'm going to butcher, but it's something to the effect of, people don't meet you from where people don't meet you or give you feedback from where you are, but from where they are. So their limitations in giving you feedback become your limitations if you let them.
Yeah.
If you think about the fact, well, they haven't done that for $5,000, so of course they don't think that it's possible.
Yeah.
They're currently doing it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
wonderful. And also the beauty of finding your tribe. So once you find those people, you've already done that shorthand work of they know how you want the data flow. They know how you want the messaging to be, things like that. Once you have your team, you can kind of streamline that work to really get in there and get what you need to do. You're not having to kind of re-carve that path for yourself among you. Dinh, what were you about to share?
I spaced out for a second.
Sorry, about which small budget experience you were proudest of, and what were your takeaways from it?
You know, there's not one thing that I can be the proudest of. I think what Sofia's point is very genuine, and it makes a lot of sense. I'd like to just add that if one can wear many hats, you'll find success in that. And in wearing those hats, you know, being a writer, being a director, and editing my own stuff, all of those three things evolve my consciousness in each of those skills. Watching your own footage, cutting your own footage, and going, oh, I shouldn't have, because you're going to hear yourself on camera. Like, I probably shouldn't have said it that way. Or why did I cut so early? And that realization is an awakening. And that effect just trickles everything that I do. And it's very fulfilling, you know, when I want to make something, I know that I can do most of the work and it'll be okay, you know, and acknowledging where I need help and taking advantage of that lack of knowledge, right? It's just all this philosophical stuff that it takes a little bit of time to get used to, but yeah, trying to do more, you know.
But that's why we love having you around, is the philosophical aspect.
Oh, Jesus. Anybody got some weed?
You also have made a great point, because I know you've done multiple directorship programs, and wouldn't you say that it's advantageous if you have goals of event, if you're currently writing something that you would like to produce in, say, the next 6 months, wouldn't it be wise of you to try to help other people, watch them make their mistakes for your benefit, right? To be on other sets if a director will allow you and you keep your mouth shut, you know, but to be of service and to help people out, but also to learn from, oh, wow, it looks like they're having an absolute meltdown. How do I keep this from happening on my set?
Yeah.
Right? Well, so Philip is a superhero who has corrected the platform issue. So we do have a few more minutes if the two of you do.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So Philip, what questions did we have from the audience? What foods do you think are awesome? I know that we've made them panic about. So what foods do you think are awesome for feeding a low budget cast and crew?
So I have a secret that helped get us through all of our feature films. Ralph's fried or grilled chicken, like 60 pieces, you know? Okay, yeah,
I love it, yeah.
That has helped. You really just, and the dollar store. And also I think it's important to ask your crew. That was one of my favorite things to do is sit down with people in pre-production meetings or email them on the side and go, hey, y'all, thanks so much for being a part of this. What are your favorite foods? Like if you went to Crafty, what would you be so excited to see? Because I think it's important to let them know that they're heard. So yeah, kind of take a poll about it.
If you have a friend, who's owns a restaurant or, you know, is in the food service industry, there's going to be a bond there if they decide that they want to cater your shoot. So I try to lean on that because they're going to be cooking with love. And so it's going to be special.
Well, and I think that would be true. We shot the majority of our series, 18 of the episodes happened in Astoria, Queens. And so we were reaching out to local businesses because that's a promotion for them. That's something, you know, they hope that they get people to come back because, man, I really like that sandwich. So that can happen. You can also make, I mean, it depends on who you're asking to do this, but if there are there are people in your community who love to cook and want to help somehow, pastas, like little bow tie pastas or things like that, can make kind of a cold pasta set. Now COVID makes that a little bit different, but you can kind of figure out what, do people want sandwiches because they can have some now and tuck some away for later? Or do they want, chips, things on the fly? Or are they wanting more of a full meal? Sometimes we did Thai and we had everybody order something within a certain price range. That way it was specifically what they wanted.
Yeah.
But a great footnote is also ask about dietary needs, because
Yes.
there are a lot of gluten-free, peanut allergy things that you can run into too. So make sure that you're not kind of tripling down on the meat every time.
That has been one of the lowest, saddest points as a producer, is if somebody accidentally messes up, or heck, if as a producer, it's your responsibility to make sure it doesn't get messed up. But if when that food comes and if the person or the caterer forgot the vegan option, or if they did add meat to the only meal that people are really looking forward to, it's important, to make sure those errors aren't made.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Is there another question, Philip? Zombies, the movie. How fabulous. How important. I love it, because this means that StreamYard let them add their name so we know who they are. Hello, Zombies, the movie.
Hi, zombies.
How important is storytelling for a low budget film? Oh, storyboarding. Just kidding. Storytelling is very important. Storyboarding for a low budget film. What's your take on that? I would imagine in terms of efficiency, it's very important, because you don't have time to waste. Oh, I didn't mean that. I meant this. I meant a medium shot. I meant, right? Yeah. I think that's going to be key.
Sofia, what do you think? From the producer standpoint, would you like to see storyboards?
Yes, because depending on, I feel like it just helps best communicate the vision, the visual, because you work with some people who do think in colors, just colors and visuals. Some people, their strongest points are calculating the numbers and some of the other moving parts. But storyboarding, to me, I think, and just as a producer, it helps instill some confidence that the team understands what their vision is, and kind of understands the frame by frame, the step. And it's valuable, I think, going into the commercial realm. A few other different projects, I would even say for the documentary thing, I know it's not storyboarding, but go in there and do the child of storyboarding. Make sure you have your outline of your questions. Make sure you know do your due diligence with the person you're about to interview. And really just go in there with a good post-production plan. I think you go in photography. It's great. Storyboarding for low budget film, I feel like if you try to do that for 90 pages, if you don't have the budget for it, I don't see what that would do, but it just goes back to what's the second best option to make sure that at least you cover those points.
Mm-hmm. That you've spent the time on it so that you're not arriving on set trying to figure out what exactly it is that you're doing. And I would
I was gonna say, if not a storyboard, then a pitch deck, something what's secondary that at least lets people know you're on track and you know what you're going for. What's the end?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Everybody has to be on the same page. And I think if it's not a crew or creatives that you've worked with before, I do think that the first day is always going to have a little bit, or the first couple of days are going to have the moments that take a little bit longer for a setup, because we're kind of getting the right feel. And then you'll pad that time, and by the end you'll have a little bit more of a shorthand to know, okay, we know what this looks like. We know that we don't do the God angle, we do this instead. Like there's going to be a cohesiveness in how you all flow and function together. What would sort of be the last essential piece of advice that you'd like to offer our audience about how to maximize low budget production? Is there a mindset that's particularly helpful, or is there a devotion to community? What's been the most valuable for you that you'd like to pass on?
Dan, would you like to take it? I've been answering.
It's a big question with a lot of answers. I think everything we've talked about, everything that the three of us have spoken about, is part of that magic for low budget. I think the one thing that is very specific to me in regards to low budget is like using the sun and making sure that we're shooting with the sun and timing the day and the locations with the sun, because you can save a lot of time and gear if, I mean, you know, whoever created this was like, you guys can have this beautiful light source and, you know, and try to use it. So that's something that I'd love to do, is just try not to have a lot of grip or lighting and try to use that sun as much as possible until we have to use an artificial light source. And even then I will scout a location that has a big light in that area and not bring any lights in. So it's just trying to be cheap and use whatever is there to tell the story.
Using the sun and excellent sound. That pair
Yes.
wrong.
And good sound.
Yeah.
And good food. And good food.
Good food.
Food, yeah.
Chad?
I would say now more than ever. I mean, I'd like to say always. It's about not just about IQ or skill set or experience. It's about EQ, and it's about really being a people person and understanding and appreciating people. And then another thing is the less ego and the less pride that you have moving forward with this vision, and understanding that it is bigger than you and bigger than what you yourself can do. No matter how good of a leader you think you are, no matter how much experience or big of a resume, if you have the lens of this is bigger than you and that you're here to take care of people and you're here to take care of somebody's vision, and it's in a collective vision and something that means a lot to people, I think that'll help paint your perspective and help paint your energy moving forward, and just be grateful for people. I've noticed that if you can't pay people what they deserve, then like you said, you feed them well. If you can't pay them what they deserve and even feed them all the stuff you wish you could, say thank you always and just let them know that they're being heard. And like, I know for me, I go on sets now where part of it's my OCD and anxiety. Some people joke around that if you have anxiety, you're a great producer because there's some detriment to it, but you're constantly looking for what could go wrong. But I know I look at people, I watch people, I see if they're affected by something, but they haven't spoken up about it. Or maybe you sense that they don't know they can speak about it if they're a little less experienced. So you just try to facilitate an environment that people understand they can express themselves, communicate, and that you're here to build something together. I think as long as there's that energy, you'll feel, as long as there's that energy, I think you'll be really fortunate with what you see you have at the end of it all. What matters most anyway, so.
I think that's so
Beautifully
valuable.
said.
Yeah,
I agree with you. I'd like to add that. Sorry, I cut you off at the end.
Oh, you're fine. I just said, and I'm still learning. I know there's other advice and stuff that I'm seeking, and it's constantly have that idea too, is we're learning, always a student, truly.
Yeah. I recently heard someone use the phrase decentering. Like, we center ourselves into a situation, meaning we're the leaders, we have the ego, we're feeling everything and everything revolves around us. And then when I heard decentering, I was like, that's fucking cool. To decenter yourself.
Yeah.
And we know, we've learned so much from the old traditions of Hollywood and story and filmmaking. And you got to be loud. You got to be a guy. You got to be a man. You got to know everything. You got to tell everybody everything. And the AD has to be tough and aggressive. And the producer's got to be, smoking a pipe and blowing it. All that stuff that is just so old is on its way out. And I unfortunately am old enough to remember some of those lessons. And it's just, we want to be in an environment where we care about each other, like Sofia said, and we want to make stuff together. And when someone gets mistreated, that's a sinking ship.
Yep. Nothing kind of perforates the balloon of the safe space so much as that. Is that energy will then kind of pull the project around the room.
And I'll share a little conversation I had with a filmmaking friend of mine. He went back to Vietnam to partner up with a production company, and he was so excited. He's like, man, we could shoot 24 hours straight. I was like, yo, you got to stop treating our people like that.
Yeah.
There's a mindset there, right? And hopefully what COVID has done is told people, hey, you know what? 12 hours has been too much for too long. Maybe it's 10, maybe 14 hours was too much. Maybe it's just 12. Right. So I hope that we as an industry sort of learn how to treat people a little bit better, because being 12 hours away from your family, your own life, is detrimental to your life. So, and it's not worth making films that way. I just don't get it. I don't understand that.
Yeah, that was so important. Can I add to that? So that's something that when I moved into, or graduated from the micro budget kid family film thing and moved into the commercial space, moved into, just as you graduate to more projects, you are going to find yourself in a room of people, or somebody who does have the checkbook, or is the one who is the client liaison, or the one who does oversee stuff. They don't have that 101 EQ, and they aren't aware of how your crew's being affected or what that 12-hour mark means. And an example, that's something I want to make sure I will never put my crew in this position again. It was branded content here in Las Vegas, and the agency that I was working with, they just didn't have production experience. They came from a completely different world. So I was there constantly on the executive calls, fighting for a green room for my crew at the link pool. After they said, oh, we have the room for the talent, I said, excuse me, can we have a green room for my crew? It's going to be 110 degrees. You have to walk from here to here. It doesn't matter if we can do it on time. How does that make them feel? How do they have water? Are they going to get extra food? Do we have somebody doing ice packs to make sure they feel like they're not work donkeys? And sometimes as a producer, and it's something, again, you sometimes get so lost, and sometimes you miss some marks to make sure you're not in that position. But then if you do find yourself in the position, you have to be prepared to fight for your people. Like, I become a mom on set. Like, I will immediately, once I see if my crew is being taken advantage of, or if I see that I've lost control of the train, because sometimes when big branded clients there, you got to just be like, all right, I'm a PA now, I'm an AD now, I'm also crafty PA, because I'm going to get no one else is here to make sure your crew's taken care of. So now I'm making sure ice packs are on your head or on your back, or give water. And so you just got to be ready to battle for your crew. And that's part of what comes into, you have to know your crew, what's important to them. And I think with COVID especially, you made a good point. That has changed some things. And I think now more than ever, people are really sick of working with people who are ungrateful or not valuing mental, emotional health, and people valuing how does somebody feel in order to get you your end result or get you X amount of money after it's all said and done. That's something I had to realize. One of my only standing projects because of pandemic was with this wonderful organization called the Economic Opportunity Board. And their whole mission is to help eliminate poverty and here in this area, and to be of service. And so it was a small budget, it was a small team, but still during pandemic, you have a crew and people in an 8-month contract of people trying to take care of more people and being like, I know you're going through COVID, but we have this deadline to help these other people. And I found myself in a position, I was spending extra hours on the phone with my crew. We became friends. Like, to sit down and listen, how's your day going? They just check on them, because you need to be a bit of a Dr. Phil or a mom about it. And so just more than ever, just let them know they're heard. I think that's so important.
I think that's so important what you say, because especially now, for people to leave their families at a time where coronavirus is going around, and so for people to make that commitment to spend time with you, to test so that they can come play with you, and especially if you're not able to pay them, or they have to defer, or they're taking some kind of cut for whatever you've negotiated, we have to go above and beyond for people who are making those agreements anyway, but particularly now. And one of the things that usually helps me out, that I kind of use as a motto now in my life and on my sets, is that energy is a boomerang, so that what you're sending out is what's coming back. And if you feel, the energy is kind of sagging, then like what you're sending out is going to sort of permeate the room. And conversely, another sort of principle that's been coming up a lot is that we love saying in the world of creation and in improv, a yes and, but sometimes a no but in production is actually a gift. No, that's too ambitious, but if we reframe it, we could achieve this thing and realize the idea this way. But you want to make sure that as a producer, sometimes you can kind of rein it into what we can do in the parameters of what we have. So know that as creators and writers and people who have ambitious stories they want to tell but might not have the budget for, the no is not always a wall. The no is sometimes a redirection that will lead you to something that is a different realization than you anticipated, but is right for the situation you're in. And so I think you guys have all navigated that very well over this time and going forward. We wish you all the best. Lastly, where can we find you? What's coming up next for you?
You can go.
You're able to talk about it.
So,
Got projects
I
coming
just
up?
booked a directing gig on a Hulu series. I don't know if they've announced anything yet, so I probably shouldn't say anything. And then in the past year, I've been really lucky to be co-writing a pilot for Freeform. And so we're waiting to hear back from the executives. So we'll see what happens.
Fantastic. We'll be looking for you on Freeform and Hulu, you said.
Yeah.
The rest is
I didn't say anything though. Nobody knows
it's
anything.
the best place to be though. It's the most exciting place. Is like, I have things to say, but I can't yet.
I can't.
I know that it's juicy. What about you, Sofia?
I've been working to develop and strengthen the philanthropreneur department of my company. So my company is about stories, marketing, philanthropy, and art. And I set on that mission back in 2015, and then COVID hit. So, everyone's recalibrating of what their plan looked like. But I haven't strayed from that. I'm really developing the nonprofit component, the community program component, and showing people that it's not just about profit, but it's about impact. And showing people that there is a system that works in our world of cinema and entertainment and the arts, that we can make an impact on the community level. So some of the things I can't talk about, but overall it's in-house original content and some campaigns, and just finding more people who are cooler than I am to join forces with, to try to get some of these things out of my head, and then to help facilitate some of these visions other people have. So
it's a beautiful place to be. Irons in the fire. Well, thank you both so much for being so generous with your time. We're very lucky to be in your orbit, and thank you for spending time with us.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.